Okay, we are live. So, hi everyone. It's June 20th, and I'm here with Julie and Kendra, and we are going to talk a little bit about this, what's being called the reflection and review process. And this is a pilot process that's starting this year, and we wanted to just use this as a really light touch introduction to it. And basically, this was a continuation, or kind of like the final pilot of what was started in January at the Austin retreat. So I have a slide deck that I'm going to pull up. Oh, you folks should say hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
I promised the two of you that this would be a super light touch thing, so let's keep it that way. And we were both talking about how we haven't done a hangout in a really long time, especially with YOUmedia stuff. So yeah, this is real good. Okay, so I'm going to make this big. Can you see this?
I can.
Okay. I'm going to keep it just in this this view with like the things on the side, so I can jump back and forth between windows. All right, so the reflection and review pilot. And when we met last month in Berkeley, this is one thing that we talked about a lot, and it's this number. And this number is a week before everyone convened, I sent an email to all of the leaders of YOUmedia Learning Labs and asked them for how many unique youth come to your lab annually. And this was the number that we came up with, which is huge. And we had a conversation about what are the implications of that number. And Kendra or Julie, what were some of the things that you were thinking about when we were talking about this?
Well, I mean, besides the fact that it's just a really large number, and I get so used to thinking about my own space, my own community, I forget. Yeah, there's a lot of kids across the country who are working on this stuff. So the reach is really broad, and it really helped me to see a number like that, to think about the broad reach that we have, and particularly considering that this work is really just beginning in a lot of places. So we've just started to reach out, and it's already so broad, and that's really exciting.
And I've been thinking a lot about what that number means in terms of engagement as well. 43,700 is a lot of teens, and they're doing a lot of different things and engaging with like a lot of different media and mentors and ideas, and it's just a really beautiful thing to see in one place.
Yeah, so the next thing we were thinking about with that big number are, okay, so we have this number, and we have all of these youth that we're serving in these very different geographic locations and very different institutions with different staffing models. So why do we want to make this reflection process for the network, for practitioners in the network? And then the second question that we asked ourselves was, why do we want to make a process to expand the network and make the network larger? Were there any things that you two were thinking about, or when we were having this conversation, anything that you noticed other people talking about?
I mean, in terms of reflection, and I feel like we talk about this every time a group of us gets together, we just learned so much from hearing about different types of practices that are happening in different spaces and what's been effective in one space versus another. And so I think any opportunity we have to share out the successes and challenges of our space is a place for us all to be learning something new. So that's why I like the reflection piece of that.
One of the things that I really like about the reflection piece is you spend so much time developing programs and developing partnerships, working with mentors in the space. It gets really easy to forget about the bigger picture and the why of what it is we're trying to accomplish. And it's, especially when you've got a lot of people who are really excited about the work they're doing, you can drift over time away from the mission of the work. And the consultancy process, I really see it as a chance for our different organizations to stop and think about how we are holding ourselves accountable to the hallmarks of the YOUmedia spaces. And I think that's really valuable. And for most of us, unless we have something actually built in and a time frame that we have to do it by, we don't stop and take the time, because it's really hard to build that in ourselves. So I think that's another thing that's really great about this.
Yeah, another phrase that we were sort of throwing around was what is maximally beneficial for everyone in the network, but also like what is the easiest amount of work that people can do, that like there is a sweet spot in terms of like what can you give, what can you engage in, so that you can take that and bring it back to inform your practice better. But we really wanted to make this as light touch as possible, but as meaningful as possible at the same time. Was there something else? I'm really glad that you brought up the hallmarks, Kendra, because I think that's a really great point. And as we were like trying to like wrangle this hangout today, and you mentioned that before we went live, I was thinking like, oh, right, because this seems like a very easy way to at least test, like, can we remind ourselves of the hallmarks every year and just make sure that we're sort of oriented in that sort of true north direction. It's just a recalibration, right?
Absolutely. I think that's what it gives us the opportunity to do.
All right, so let's take another look. I stopped my screen share. So the week that we got together, actually, Julie and Kendra and I, along with Kim, we went to Maker Faire that Sunday, but it was kind of the culmination of just like Maker Week period in the Bay Area. We were meeting in Berkeley, and so we're like, all right, this weekend we are also going to be making this thing. We're making this pilot. And I think one of the traps that happens, well, it's like a very good trap with the YOUmedia Network, is you get together with all these people, and there are all of these ideas that it's hard to get anything really finalized and done and decided on, because it's like, oh, well, what about this? Or what about these other things? So we were like, okay, we have X number of hours to really finalize the plans that we started in January in Austin when we were starting to come up with designs. So here is what we came up with. It's this reflect and review pilot. I'm going to try and make this. Will you tell me, does this, hang on. Does this become larger when I go like this?
It did, yes.
Okay. Should we all talk through this, or does someone want to take a little bit of this to walk through this timeline for this year for the pilot? Or we can all do it, or I can do it and then we can talk through it. I'll just do that. So it's starting this summer and it ends next summer. We wanted a pilot year this year. And as I'm talking through this, I'll do it slowly. So Kendra and Julie, if you have any things that you want to say, just jump in, because I can't see you right now.
Okay.
So June and July, this is really about communicating what this process is to everyone else in the rest of the network. And I was saying to Julie and Kendra that I was like, this isn't our only shot at communicating this, and I think as we're communicating a pilot process, we need to be able to say it a lot of times, and we need to say it clearly.
And I think that will leave some space for feedback, because this is the pilot year, so we'd absolutely need feedback on the process itself and how we're rolling it out, and if we're explaining things in a way that is digestible to people as well, because we want to make sure that everyone is understanding what it is we're trying to do with the process.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, Julie and I were trying to communicate this to Trisha over an LC meeting, and she was just sort of silent and had a lot of questions at the end. So she was like, I think you're going to really need to describe this to people. So thank you, Trisha, from afar. So communicating this throughout this summer, and in August is when we are going to be recruiting volunteers, and we're looking for about 7 to as many as 10 learning labs to be a volunteer for this pilot year. And what a volunteer would mean is that you would go through the pilot process and then be able to do a little bit of reflection and give feedback on, was this helpful? Was it too burdensome? Was it not as robust as it should have been? That kind of stuff. So all of these, it's basically a consultancy process with a little bit of writing and then some data collection. It's really not that much stuff. So we're going to use an intranet, which is a Google site. It's going to be a Google site, and it's really just a repository of a bunch of Google Docs, and also with the ability to upload some things into it. So basically, it'll have the consultancy protocol, which will be about a 30-minute consultancy, some data to collect, which is also we're figuring out this year, but it's along the lines of how many unique youth do you have. And at its simplest, it's, what did we call it? It was like, what's your turnstile count for the space?
Yeah.
Socioeconomic stuff, if possible, zip code stuff, if possible. So just some very simple data. And what else is there?
Oh, and then writing a reflection.
Yeah. So you do the you write a reflection based on the hallmarks. And so Julie and Kendra, should I go this deep into it immediately? I think let's like chunk this out a little more.
Well, let's go through the process instead of getting really deep into each piece.
Yeah. Okay.
Get an overview of the year, and then we can take it a piece at a time.
All right. So you get this guiding document that's going to be on the intranet that's going to tell you how you're going to go through the process. And on the guiding document, it's some questions like, hey, your year has been really great. A lot of stuff has happened. Take a little bit of time to talk with your staff about what happened this year. Julie, you were on the team that wrote that frame, like kind of like guiding language document, right?
Yeah, so it was really trying to get people to reflect about what has happened in the last year. That's a long period of time to summarize everything that you do, and all of our sites are so dynamic that there's so much happening on a constant basis. So really trying to distill that into some of the big themes that you've seen throughout the year, or any sort of standout challenges that are reoccurring, and maybe you're having some difficulties figuring out strategies on how to improve those situations in your space. So really big picture, big themes for that.
Right, and so it was really about designing this question that was also in response to the hallmark language. So designing a question, writing up a little bit of a reflection, like here's the question that we have, or here's sort of something that we're struggling with, and clarifying that question so you can take it to a consultancy. So this is all happening August to December. You're going to write that initial reflection, come up with that question, do the consultancy, and then you're going to revisit, or I don't know if it's rewriting or revisiting that document, and writing some sort of summary, like here was our initial question, here's the consultancy that we did, and here's our reaction to what we've learned over the past year. Write some sort of response. Does that all does that strike any bells with you? Does that seem correct?
Yep.
Okay, great. I know, Kendra, you were like, let's not get too into the weeds here as I like get deeper into the weeds and all this stuff. All right, so you do a reflection, you do your consultancy, you write a response to that consultancy, and then January 31st comes around, and you are going to upload the final reflection along with the data you've been collecting, a support form, which I'm not sure if we're going to do for the pilot, so let's just stick a pin in that for now, and then any updates you have to the, and that shouldn't say intranet, it should say internet. No, that's right. So any updates you have to youmedia.org, or any staff changes that you're having, anything that you want changed publicly, and that's actually very easy, because then someone from NWP just edits it, edits your location and description on the website. February to April, we'll do some reflection on the process. Excuse me. So we will all get together and have, like, probably through a hangout, and say, like, did this work? Did this not work? Was it beneficial? And then February to August, it's about disseminating data. So I know that, Julie, you had mentioned something about um, like your interest in, like, well, what do we do with all the data once we've collected it?
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah, so
mind?
where does all of that go? Or what are we going to do with it? And I think that's something that we're in the pilot process we're still sort of figuring out. We know that gathering this data is going to be important in terms of allowing space for all of us to reflect on what's been going on in the last year, how we're aligning to the hallmarks or not aligning, and how we want to move forward. But I'm still trying to figure out exactly how else that data is going to be used.
Yeah, because it's going to be really a lot of stuff. It's not only like the numbers, but also like how can we use these reflections to keep on learning from each other? And I think that really goes back to that initial, to both the initial, like, you know, how do we expand, but also how do we deepen the network? It's through seeing, like, oh, this group is struggling with the same things that this group is struggling with, or maybe this would be helpful to somebody else. So we were going to go through each of these things. Should we continue to go through the slide? Or I guess, are there any questions, or were there any things that are coming up for either of you as you're reviewing this process a month later?
The only thing that was not clear for me for the timeline is the data reporting. Are we going to have only people in the initial pilot report their data? Are we asking every site to report their data? Since that's the data reporting is just recording of the numbers.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think asking the pilot sites as being part of the pilot year to report data, I think that makes sense to only have the pilot sites because, you know, they're the only ones that are doing the consultancy also. But I think if we could collect something very easy from other people who might already be collecting that data anyway, like things like, you know, that most people are collecting how many youth are coming into the space, because if people weren't, we wouldn't have had any response. But I'm just curious if there's other data that people are collecting out there that we might be able to use on behalf of the network to go after grants that could benefit the entire network, or we could write up some sort of boilerplate language for everyone so that they could say, like, and we're part of the YOUmedia Learning Labs network that serves X number of youth in these kinds of locations. Like, how could that kind of feed back to us and provide some sort of narrative that everyone could use?
I think that would be really helpful, particularly for me as a new site where I'm really starting to build partnerships in my community, to be able to say we're really a part of this wider national network doing this work. And I think that helps people really understand why we are doing what we're doing, and it's exciting for them to then be a part of. So I think that would be really helpful.
And I think something we've talked about a lot, just because I'm thinking of whoever's watching this hangout is thinking maybe I'm not sure that we're collecting the right kinds of data for our site. So we talked a lot about what types of data we would be asking for, knowing that not every site is going to have everything that we're asking for, and using this as a process to find out what you are collecting, because maybe there's something that one site's collecting and no one else is that would be really valuable for all of us to be collecting. So it's also a way for us to internalize some processes and sort of, you know, get everyone on the same page in terms of what information we're going to be asking for, so that we can go out for those grants and have all of that supporting documentation as well.
Okay, awesome. So, like we mentioned before, we are looking for volunteer labs who might want to try out this process, or who might be interested in this process. And we'll probably have I think we might have another podcast or something like that about this process with any questions that anyone might have, because I'm sure some more questions will come up. So if you are interested, email me. So I'm going to put my email back up again. It's ksteele@nwp. And so, like we mentioned, it would go for 1 year. It would start in August and this year and end in August 2017, knowing that the bulk of the work will happen probably between August and end of January, with some reflection in the spring leading up to the summer. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for getting this organized.